And then about 25% of brain left, I think. Just know that however crazy we are, my kids were way crazier this morning. Got in from last night, so midnight.
Ready, Erica?
We're ready.
Excellent. Well, we'll go ahead and start our goal setting meeting for February 16th. Start with introductions. I'm Pat Malone, Commissioner and Chair.
Charles Long, Corvallis Mayor.
Nancy Wise, Commissioner.
Julie Arena, Health Coordinator.
Gary Stockoff, Public Works.
Laurel Meyer, Public Works.
Erica Milo, Board Reporter.
Joe Kirby, County Administrator.
April Holland, Public Health.
Sean Morrell, BSC.
Dan Rosenberg, Oak Creek Drive resident.
And do we have folks online that want to introduce themselves?
Suzanne Hoffman, Health Department Director.
Morning.
Rob Upson, Mid Valley Bike Club.
All right. Anybody else? Hearing none, are there any announcements this morning? Hearing none, next up is review and approve the agenda. Are there any additions or corrections?
Commissioner, no additions or corrections at this time.
Great, we'll consider our agenda approved. Next up, 3.1, Oak Creek Drive, Edge Lanes, braking configuration. Laurel Meyer and Terry Stockoff.
Nice to meet.
I know you're here, Gary. I can see you.
I know nothing.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't believe me. Don't believe me. Waiting for the slideshow to come up. Good morning, Commissioners. And so I apologize, when I put the slide deck together, I thought you wanted more information on what edge lane roads are, but evidently you've had a presentation maybe last August, but I'll go back over them just in case you need a refresher. And so what they really are delineated lanes for cars and bikes to share a road. And they're intended to be used on a road that has low average daily traffic, or low speeds, so low volumes. And so the idea is you would add these white skip stripes on the shoulders, and the cars would generally drive down the middle of the road. And if another car approaches, you can move over into the shoulder and back, as long as there aren't any bikes or pedestrians there. So the idea is it kind of utilizes the shoulder as a de facto bike lane and a protected area for the bike and the pit to use. And so they're really used heavily in Amsterdam and in European countries, and they've been used there for years successfully. And so they were brought to the United States as an idea, and somebody, I don't know who it was, approached the Federal Highway Administration and got permission to do it as an experimental treatment. And so how this works in the United States is you have, because there's a lot of good ideas that come through with new technology as well as new treatments. You go to the Federal Highway Association, you pitch the idea, and they go, yeah, that sounds great. Let's put it into experimental class. And then they give out permits for jurisdictions to be able to apply these treatments. And so right now, this is still considered experimental treatment in the United States. And the idea is that they would take information, the FHWA would, and then analyze it, come up with an idea, and decide if it can receive an interim approval. And if there's an interim approval, then anybody can use that treatment until it is actually formally adopted into the manual on uniform traffic control devices, which, and you've probably heard me talk about the manual on uniform traffic control devices, but it's kind of our guideline and our standard of practice. And the county has been working really hard with our striping and sign foremen to make sure that all of our stripings and our signage reflects what is in the manual of uniform traffic control devices, because that's why when you go to California or go to Idaho, it still looks the same when you go and drive, because most of the signs are the same and the striping is very similar. So pros, I'll just go through this really quickly. You know, there's a potential to reduce speeds and crashes in the corridor. Basically, you're adding shoulders to a road where you don't actually have to add pavement, so it's a lot less expensive to add this shoulder. And like I mentioned, there is a lot of success in the Netherlands and other countries in Europe. So I did mention, like right now it's currently classified as an experimental treatment. And unfortunately, the Federal Highway have decided not to allow any more permits to have any other installations of an edge lane road or an advisory bike lane at this time. But that could be good news, because that generally means that they are either have enough data to look at including it in the MUTCD, or they're going the next step and they're working with other design professionals to kind of basically put together design standards and guidelines to incorporate it into the MUTCD. I mentioned that it's not meant for high speed or high volume roads. And really, it's very important to have sight distance because you need to be able to see that there's a car coming at you or to see if there's pets or bikes on the shoulder. And education and outreach is also very important because, like me personally, I know what this is, but if you came up to this on the road, you'd be like, where do I go? You know, I'm not quite sure what this is. And so that's also very important. And it does have the potential to increase maintenance costs, obviously, because we have more stripes on the road. So right now, going back to why can't we actually apply it yet in Benton County? And that's really because of the status it's at the federal level. I'll give you another example. So the countdown pedestrian timers that are in downtown Corvallis, those were under the same sort of process. When the city of Corvallis first installed those countdown timers, they actually had to go to the Federal Highway Administration to get a permit to install them. And they became part of the experiment and gave data to the federal highways. Then the feds decided, okay, this is a great opportunity. You know, it actually gives the pedestrians an idea of how long they have to cross. And so they gave it an interim approval. And then at the next supplement to the MUTCD, they were included, they were given design standards, and then now we can use them at our crosswalks. So right now, we don't have an approved design guidance from the feds. It's not in the manual of uniform traffic control devices, and so our hands are kind of tied. I'm actually part of the Oregon Traffic Control Devices Committee, and we had the opportunity to review the draft MUTCD that's actually supposed to be updated by May of 2023. And it was not I wasn't part of the bicycle group, but I did contact the ODOT staff person that was part of the bicycle group to find out what's really the status on these. And he said that at this time, there's no path forward to install them at this moment, but at the federal level, the national, so there's the Oregon Transportation or Traffic Controls Device Committees, and then there's also a national committee of the same genre, a whole bunch of engineers. And they actually are working with a bicycle advocate group to come up with design standards and a way forward on these edge bike lanes. So that's the current status. Let's see. Oh yeah, the Bicycle Technical Committee is what it's called. So then AASHTO is also supposed to update the bicycle guide with guidance on these edge lane roads. There isn't anything in there right now. So even if the county wanted to install something like this, there's no guidance. How far apart do you do the skid stripes? You know, do we need to have painted shoulders? Is that more effective? And so these are some of the things that the feds are looking at as they put together guidance and design standards for us. for everybody really to use. So, like I mentioned, if for some reason the bicycle technical committee and the national committee on the uniform traffic control devices, if they can't come to agreement on a path forward on these, I still see that there's probably going to be an interim approval at some point, if they can't be part of the MUTCD by that May deadline, because that's pretty strict, because it's in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that they have to actually adopt this MUTCD. And the good news too is that they're also required every 4 years to update it for more safety features. The last MUTCD was updated in 2009, so it's been a while. Yeah, so they've had a couple of supplements since then, but the feds are like, the federal government is really saying, no, you need to be doing this more often because there's so many innovations that are happening as we go. I guess are there any questions? Gary, do you have any?
Well, I would add to that, and I've seen this because when I was at City of Reno, we actually did some road diets and other things, and that usually involved just restriping, which would be this instance here. We'd have to add stripes or restripe, but we would usually wait until we've done a surface treatment, a surface treatment scheduled. So we would make it as part of that. This section of Oak Creek Drive, something is in the future. I can't say it's 2 years from now or 3 years, but there will be a surface treatment, and that's when we would look at if there's a striping change, we would make it at that time and incorporate it all at the same time. So,
and we do feel that this section of Oak Creek is a good candidate for this treatment. It's just we're kind of stuck right now in the middle. We're in a waiting game to be able to actually use it. And we look at it not only from county liability. If we go in there and stripe it and it's not an approved practice, we're opening up ourselves to that liability if something happens.
Laurel, is it the part that's confusing for me? Is it accurate that we absolutely cannot do it because the Federal Highway Administration has stopped accepting permits for approval?
Yes.
Or is it just do we have the discretion to say we're going to do it anyway?
We don't have that discretion. That's my opinion, that we don't have that discretion to do that because that opens us up for liability. This is how it works for these like bicycle traffic signals, or like I said, the crossing signals. There's steps to the process. And if it is an improved standard or has design guidance, I don't have anything to look to in that, so I would be making it up. And so that opens up our liability because I'm not going by a set standard. Does that make sense?
Question. So I will apologize. I think I missed something. I'm not familiar with what's the section of Oak Creek Drive we're talking about, or
Okay.
Was this on a plan? Were we hoping to do this? Or?
So specifically, we've been working with the neighbors in that neighborhood for several years regarding speeds and access. So at the end of Oak Creek Drive is a trailhead to one of the OSU forestry areas. And so we've worked with them really over the years. We installed these wooden bollards so that way we could limit parking on the road, so that way we can increase sight distance there. We've also put share the road signs along the corridor. So really it's Tanager North, I believe. There's a bridge there.
So was this a request by the community?
Yes.
To look into this and have it come to a meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, sorry.
And Commissioner, just a little bit more information. Mr. Rosenberg, who is in the audience today, had presented information last August, I believe it was, and has been communicating with Commissioner Malone on this particular topic. Commissioner Malone advocated to me to bring it to a meeting so we can have a broader discussion about what is the status. Mr. Rosenberg had provided information previously. And so the intent of the meeting this morning was to just brief the board, have an open dialogue about this particular use. Commissioner Malone has an interest in finding out, well, if edge lane striping is not something that we can or choose to pursue at this point. What are other alternatives that might be considered to address the concerns of the neighbors?
Okay, perfect, thank you. I think that brings me up to speed.
Okay, sorry.
There's,
Probably talked too fast.
there's a problem, in the good weather months, people wanting to access the trailhead. Other people live there and, there's, it's accurate to say inadequate parking at the trailhead. People, parking and, people walking on the road, cyclists, cars. So I think we can all agree there's a problem. This is a potential solution, and I'd be open to, is there anything else in the works to improve the traffic situation in this area?
So back to my contact at ODOT, who was on the bike or was involved with the bicycle portion of the MUTCD updates. He is the senior traffic engineer for ODOT, and so he's, kind of up to date on all of these. But it's funny because he sent me recommendations. He's like, okay, what can you do in the interim? And so he's like, well, depending on how much traffic it is, road width, you could talk about removing the center line. We've already done that. So there's no center line there, and it kind of de facto operates like an edge lane road, except there's no buffer there that like kind of gives the pedestrian or, the bicyclist a more sense of safety or like an area to go. And so, people generally, when there's no center line, they stay towards the middle of the road, and then when somebody comes, they move over. Again, we won't use it unless there's sight distance, because you want to be able to see that oncoming traffic, and if somebody is walking or biking along there. So we've done that. And the other thing is a combination of roadway warning sign packages. And I mentioned previously that we did put in share the road signs, but then we also put on a speed rider that says, hey, go 20 miles per hour in this section because there's heavy use in here. So we've really tried to do what we can within the current MUTCD and what is allowed. And so I feel like people, I feel like we're in the business of saying no, right, Gary? But I'm really like stuck with the guides and the manuals that I have and how I can move forward with this stuff. And we've really done a lot of design and a lot of outreach and effort to try to make it better. I know it's not perfect. And I know Dan Rosenberg and some of the people that live and walk along there aren't satisfied. I'm really, really stuck.
Well, and a couple things, but it seems like there would be more pedestrians and cyclists if it was safer. Like you say, well, it kind of, I've seen pictures that Dan submitted, and it looks like it's already de facto, at times anyway, acting like Edgeley Road, only with no instructions and no signage
Right.
and no striping. It just kind of works that way. So it seems, I guess my hope would be we could advance, if this is the best solution to the problem, figure out how to do what we can to speed up the process and make it go from de facto to actual usage. There's something in here on the cons, increased cost. This section of Oak Creek is not going to be widened. Is that?
Well, I should have mentioned, that is another option. We could spend our money to widen Oak Creek and get, additional right of way in that corridor. That's always an option, but that's much more expensive, right? Than utilizing what's there.
Well, and how much traffic and is this best use of the
Right.
dollars? But I think I saw something that it might save the county money because cars wouldn't be driving on the edges of pavement and.
I think when that was Commissioner, because it's, 18, 19 feet. If we build our section, it would be a section that's consistent across the board. We wouldn't lower the thickness at the edges. I mean, because we have to presume that the whole road is going to be used at some point. So we would maybe look to do a little shoulder widening if we can without, I mean, not the pavement part, but, outside of that. So I know what they were saying there. Sometimes you can lighten up the edge, because it doesn't have to be a stick to take care of the traffic. But I think we would just, after the road stayed, this would be a consistent cross section. Big log trucks, basically.
Right, yeah, I was gonna say there's multiple users out there.
Okay.
Oh, well, I just had a couple of questions. So this issue is stemming from or a symptom of the fact that we have the hiking trails up there, or is, if there were no hiking trails, would this still be an issue, or is this really just a symptom of maybe not having the proper infrastructure to go along with our recreational activities?
I think this is, and we have this not just here, but in other places where we have an active recreation, thing, and people want to get out and use that. So we see an increase in traffic and increase in, whatever pedestrian and sometimes speeds, and people, the users don't always pay attention. So I mean, it's kind of that, it's a good thing we've got the recreation, but it does have other impacts. So that's probably what this is. So if it went away, this would be just
A dead end road.
a typical, county road, yeah.
And I'm not saying that's an option or.
Right,
I'm saying.
yeah.
And then, so Laurel, you were saying, so you were on the, I forget what you said.
Oregon, yeah, I know, I always forget what it
FTC.
sounds. The Oregon Traffic Control Devices Committee, yes.
Okay, and then you said that there will be an update to that at some point. Could you remind me what that timeline is?
Yes, May 2023, they're
Okay.
supposed to be updating it.
So we would potentially find out in May if this,
Probably this year, we would have a very good idea of what the, forward progress is on this particular treatment at the federal level.
okay, so if,
But it sounds like it's not included in the draft.
It wasn't included in the draft, but according to, my guy who was back at the national convention where they were talking about it, there's movement. It may not get into the actual update in the 2023 revision, but that doesn't mean it can't get interim approval and still be allowed to be used.
They have to make it kind of drop dead
Yeah,
because it's been going on so long. They want to get the update done, but they also know there's things that have come up that are still valid.
yeah,
So it'd be a supplemental thing that would then enable us to move forward.
right,
So hopefully this year,
yeah.
we'll get something that says these are okay, and here's the parameters. of
Do
how
we
you
need
use it.
signs? I mean, there's a whole bunch of, ramifications on the design and how we actually install it. Because if I go, I don't have my slideshow anymore, but back in the picture, there was colored shoulders on one with stripes. And then within the US, it's like, well, we need signs to make sure we let people know how to use these. And so we want the feds to be able to tell us, okay, what is appropriate? How often do we need signs? Like I said, how far apart are these skip stripes? Are they just like normal?
And I know that's so into the weeds.
That's engineering-esque.
But-
that's our-
It's litigation and the potential of being, and I know, well, probably wouldn't happen, but I've just seen in my career so many times when you had the wrong sign, you didn't have the right striping, and the agency is sued because of an accident. So that's why we're probably Uber, the MUTCD or some document will give us coverage that says, now we have to go on this. And so the answer is, we think these are appropriate. And once we have something that gives us some coverage, I think we can look at implementing it and look at there, or there's other places too. And then we would then factor that into our annual pavement maintenance program and how we would then be able to incorporate the striping changes as we do the treatment, surface treatments.
so it sounds like we might know more in May.
Yes, potentially.
Laurel, there's other communities in Oregon that have chosen to test this, for lack of a better term. But you know, if those communities went through the application of permit process that you
I
described?
know that some have, and I know that some have not. And that would basically come back to my personal liability. If I decided to say, yes, let's install these. So,
Oh, similar question. Was it Port Townsend's experience doing this? And I think that was in the downtown section. Did they get a liability waiver, or how did they?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Maybe Dan, I think there was someone who spoke engineer in Port Townsend, public works person that maybe we can get more information from and just see what they're, because I think
It
that's.
could
in
be,
place.
so I do know that a lot of these items that are used on edge lane roads, I mean, they exist in the MUTCD, but it's the combination of them. So it could be that they utilize, in their mind, they went, oh, well, this is a bike lane and we can do a skip stripe here and pull up. We have an edge lane road. I'm not sure. Dan, you have,
I'd be glad to update you on that, and
Why don't you go to
the engineer in Port Townsend, the engineer in Portland, who are working on these, would be a very good resource for everybody to speak to. They are very much pro ELR, and they feel that there's more liability by not using these treatments that are very well established throughout the United States. So I'll leave it at that, but I'm glad to expand and send more materials to you. But it's going on in Portland, Oregon. We're behind, and they're very excited about it. In Port Townsend, Laura Parsons, the chief engineer there, is very excited about it. She added 3 more very recently.
Nancy?
I'll just say, it sounds like we have a little bit of a problem here, an issue. I'm all for trying to find solutions to make it better. I do just want to say that, until it's officially okay to do, I would not support doing it. Until we have the okay from the TCD, whatever, official stuff you guys are talking about, I would not push.
I guess I would balance that. We already have the problem. People are cars and are trying to maneuver. It's not a 2-lane road. When put pedestrians and cyclists and kids and from some of the pictures that I've seen, it's already being done just informally. And well, what are the rules? What am I supposed to be doing? Who has the right of way? Just basic questions like that. But I appreciate some.
I would strongly support learning a little bit more about how Portland and Port Townsend are implementing it without the same liability concerns, just so that we better understand that and being proactive. This has been a problem for years. It's only getting worse. And I think it's an accident waiting to happen.
Thank you.
Well, and we want to promote people being outside and safely, and I think we can eliminate at least a few cars if cyclists felt comfortable, like they had a cyclist in good condition up to the trailhead. So I hope we can continue this conversation and figure out a path forward.
If I could just have 5 seconds more. In terms of equity, which we're all talking about now, there are many neighbors, older and also somebody with a disabled son, who no longer can walk there, feel like they cannot walk there. So just a very quick example about how many of the county goals would be achieved through this application that is being used everywhere in the United States. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate you doing the homework and leaving us with some references to follow up on. So
Thank you for the discussion. I appreciate that. And I'll send out some more materials.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's it on that topic. Next up, park goals and the budget. Bill Kirby and Sean McGuire.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sean is actually the star of the show today. And
I just don't know whether Mark or Paul. either way.
you can be both if you want to change seats.
Something I should do, it's good. Thank you. I'm going to provide a little bit more of an abbreviated presentation than I think we had 15 to 20. I know you're very busy with other things in the agenda. So what I want to do, Joe and I want to come in and share with you the latest update of our goals that were submitted. So as you remember, all departments and offices were required to develop to identify 2 to 5 goals based on your priorities as well as our community core values and focus areas. What you have before you is the final list of submitted goals. I have it in the packet. I don't know if you want them on the screen or not, but it's in your packet. Wanted to share with you just a couple of items on that. One, this is as of February 10th, as Joe and Rick can share. This is changing by the time I finish the sentence. And so I know they're having extensive along with Suzanne. The other one is some of these goals are predicated on funding. And so as they proceed down the track, some of those may fall off. So I just want to let you know that's where we are. Yes.
I was wondering about that, the goals that are highlighted in blue that are called stretch goals, are those mostly the ones that are budget?
Not all.
Okay,
Most, I would say a fair most, but not all. Stretch was there's no official countywide definition of that, but just something that's going to push the department more than what they're doing. That's what it was.
okay,
Now, let's just say the very first one from the assessment, that one is predicated on significant funding from their pot. But now I want to be clear, not all of them are, but great question.
And Commissioners, where you'll actually see these as part of the budget process. For example, the first one regarding assessment, I think there's Sean, you'll have to remind me, I think there's like a $365,000 request as part of the policy packages that have been submitted. Policy packages or anything over and above the current service level that we're offering. And so we are, Suzanne, Rick, myself are currently reviewing, I think we have 33 policy packages and we're reviewing those 33. And one of the things that we consider is whether or not there is a 2040 goal that request is attached to. And so you will be seeing the ones that we're recommending. You'll also be seeing the ones that we're not recommending, not because we don't think that they're valuable, but because the funding, we have close to $13 million in requests for policy packages. And I think we'll be lucky if we can end up with honoring 3 to 5 million of those requests potentially.
I have a follow-up question there. Some of these goals are very much oriented towards improving efficiency. And somewhere in our process, as we prepare for the budget discussions, will the departments also have an opportunity to tell us what the cost savings might be by getting some of these things done as well?
I'll have to ask Rick to address that question specifically. That the departments will have an opportunity to come in front of the budget committee to talk about their budget. And if the board has a desire for more information, then we'll need to prepare them for that.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, Rick is I've asked him to develop a framework for those budget presentations for the departments, for the board. In the past, as you may remember, sometimes they're all over the place. And the last two years ago, we tried to take a step towards more consistency. And this is going to be one of those elements that I could pass on to Rick to ask him to take into consideration in developing that framework.
Thank you.
See, Rick turned on his camera too.
Rick.
Sorry, I was listening. I apologize. So yes, Commissioner Ojiro, thank you for your feedback on that. And that's the kind of feedback that I want to make sure I get to ensure that as we put the presentation together, we're making sure the board and the Citizens Budget Committee is getting the information they need. What my intent is that, as Joe said, there are likely going to be policy packages that will be in the budget recommendation, but then there will be those that we are not going to be recommending in. But my intent is to make sure that you get an opportunity to hear on both of those and be able to get additional information about what is needed. So again, thank you for the feedback.
Sorry, Rick, we're just having a little, I think we mainly heard you. It's just very quiet. We're trying to figure out the audio for.
Sorry about that, Commissioner Wise. I'm losing my voice a little bit too. So if I'm not coming across very clearly, I apologize.
Well, it's not you. We're just having some issues.
Commissioners, just interjecting while we have a moment of silence that we're having a pushing back to 10 o'clock to looks like 10:20 to 10:30. So Congresswoman Hoyle won't be here until that time.
So we're running late. It might make us a little bit more. Rick, could you give us a little test? Volume, just go ahead and say something.
Can you hear me better now? Testing. Would you like me to break into a song? I'm happy to break into a song if you like.
Yes.
I don't want to torture you guys this morning. I can't sing.
Proceed, or I know there's a, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know if there was a additional from Rick.
Sean, would you like these on the screen? Is that helpful?
That's up to you. I think I'd rather focus on the last page to kind of get to your question, Commissioner Rozier, on how we're going to start analyzing these. But the last thing I would want to say is please review the goals at your leisure. The other ones I want to focus a little bit of time that we have a couple extra minutes, then I can elaborate just a little more.
And Commissioners, you have seen most of these goals already in previous presentations, so we continue to refine them and calibrate them and incorporate them into the budget process.
So it was just very briefly, just 2 minutes or less to 5 from the Board of Commissioners office. So we'll just go in order. One is Jen and I will, one of our goals is to develop a countywide carbon sequestration plan and also the adaptation of a countywide. I want to be crystal clear, and it was behind me to correct me. Currently, all county health offices need to be doing a health and adaptation plan because of the modernization, correct?
Public health modernization requirement for the funding. Yeah.
So close. And that's due on by the end of June, which is a perfect springboard for us to take it countywide into organizations, including parks and public works. So we're really excited. April and Sarah Harstein, Jen and myself, and John Peg involved, and so we're working very closely together to make that a smooth transition into that process. Okay. Corey is going to, on the second one, develop a standardized comprehensive strategic communications plan. This gets back to the last time I came to you to get your feedback and input on some of the ideas that you wanted. I think that was almost verbatim what Corey will be doing. Sarah will be conducting a countywide equity assessment. I know that there's a similar goal in the health department. And so once again, that synergy and working together moving forward. This has been talked about for years. Joe, when we started, then COVID hit, and then now we're back on there. So again, partnerships with all the departments. JSIP UC2 that Nick will be working on. And then the last one is the administration side, the online searchable database that I think you again specifically addressed your input on. So those are the 5 from the BOC. Other than that, I recommend that you go through them. I'm not going too deep into the connectivity because we don't know that all of them will get funded. The moment those are decided, then we'll start doing the piece analysis. What I wanted to share with you is on the last page. This is what myself, Rick, Jen Ambuel, Jane Severs wanted to do in 21. We had this little thing called COVID at the time, and we had about 3 weeks to pull all this together. Now that we have some time and some breath, we're starting to put the pieces together into more of an analysis. So I kind of want to walk you through the last page. So what we did was we looked at all of the 57 goals. That's, we had them all up. Again, some were kind of dependent on each other, but 57. And then we just did that check mark exercise that I shared with you last time. Does it address community resiliency, emergency preparedness, food and agriculture, and check? I want to stop right now because one of the recommendations you had was to have just one. The previous iteration, we had multiple checks in order to show the synergy between all these. It was great, your question half an hour ago. That's a transportation question to get onto Oak Creek, but the only reason you're going, I'm sorry, the main reason you're going there is for outdoor recreation. Some of these are just not cut and dry. This is a subjective call on my part and whoever submitted this, but again, really understand all these things are linked together, but I think Commissioner Review would specifically ask for a primary. So that's why you see 57 goals, 57 checks, keeping it tight. Second one, so I just kind of want to walk you through some of the insights that in my conversations with Suzanne, Joe, and Rick, and Jen Ambuel. First up is just the connection between the department goals and the priority and focus. That's that first bar across. You'll see on the far right, we can start putting an actual proposed number of how much this county is willing to, is recommending to spend on your priorities and our community core values. You'll also see 44 number under CSL. Departments have just said we can do these things in our current CSL. And talking to Rick, it's really challenging to kind of parse out exactly that dime, considering there's just so much going on. But that and the 4 CIP recommendations. So we are saying 3.7 million that was requested through POPs to address these priorities. That was not something we could do last time just because of timing. But again, it's giving Joe, hopefully Joe and Suzanne and Rick some insight on how to look at these things and we kind of get to, I think what you were talking about, Commissioner, is how do we start weighing these costs? This, you can also see on the second line, those are the POPs, total 13 million. I do want to say, as you see on that second line, we took out the full JSIP package of $183 million because that 12,000 would be blown out of the water and we wouldn't be able to see that. So that's what Rick recommended, that we have this separate. Lastly, and again, I could dive into these, the two things that I'm seeing just analyzing this. Joe had required every department and office to require the DA and sheriff and Vance to do some of the climate change, either mitigation or adaptation. But we're seeing that here. You'll see that was the check mark in the commissioner priorities under community resiliency, as well as in the focus area of environment and natural resources, showing that when we prioritize, departments will respond accordingly, and you can start seeing the costs and the requested funding for those. The other one that was really insightful is the text underneath. When we're just asking department heads to identify what their goals are, we had 82% of those goals reflected in either a commissioner priority or a focus area. When it's funding source, it's below 50%. I'm interpreting that as when I'm sitting in my office and where do I think this department can go? And my conversations with some of the department heads that need it a little bit, what can we do here? It's more open. It's sort of the, what do we want to do? Why are we doing this? And then we get to the POPs, or how are we going to pay for it? And so you see a lot more in the POPs under the responsible governance, getting and a full circle to your question or comment of, are we saving? Are we becoming more responsible? There's a couple here of merging applications or databases, primarily between assessment and community development and finance, so that it's all interconnected. That's a good, again, we're starting to see this now that we're tending to it, that possibility of connection. So that's both internal efficiency as well as providing a good product to the public. They come in one building, they get everything, or they can look online for all those services. So those are just some of the many. Again, that was just 15 minutes. Not unlike Laurel with kind of geeks, we can kind of dive into this, but want to open up for questions. Or if I missed anything, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
I'm just thrilled by how far we've come. This is incredible progress, both in terms of the character of the goals that we're seeing now, and also the ability to look at it this way. So I appreciate it immensely.
Thanks for working here. Thank you.
A similar kind of comment. I think it was 4 years ago. I remember talking, we were developing the next 2-year budget. And we have these 2040 goals, and we have the budget, and the to me, it seemed hit and miss combining those, and Leah actually ran an example. Oh, I have something, and shows how this could work, should work. So similar comment to Sam's. This is great progress, and shows what we could do if we have the time, take the time to be thoughtful about going forward. And current service levels is an important component, but it's not the only component. Didn't have as much time as I would have liked to run through this, but with your background information, I will do that. And it's exciting. The more aligned our goals and our operations are, just because we're doing what we're saying and what we're doing are getting closer.
I can comment on both of those. One, this is so nice to have the time. A good example that Rick and I were talking about is to have the request for goals and the pops do the same at the same time. We had some, not like it wasn't disparate, but we just said, okay, is this pop aligned with this goal? Because it wasn't the same language. This is a learning, which is the first time we've done it. So to have those aligned. The second one is to kind of get you what the services we do provide. I would kind of comment on some of the zeros that you see in some of the focus areas. I want to be clear, it's not that we don't care about education, that's not our issue. But is it a priority? I mean, and so one of the things that Joe and I, we've explained to you in the past is like, this is your 2-year priorities for this biennium. We look back and okay, so after Jason, and but okay, yes, exactly. Not that those priorities would not be priorities for the future, but maybe education and arts is the next prayer for the next plan. So we can start chipping away as we get closer and closer to 2040. So, but we do have blind spot and some of the resources that we use. So I just want to kind of highlight those to get to your point.
The historic courthouse plans might end up taking us in that direction. So, I think that it's an opportunity to think about.
And I'll just add my thank you. This obviously is a whole bunch of work that was done to come up with this. So thank you, your team, and all of our staff and all the departments that came together to make this nice document.
Well, and I'm thrilled that you're deeply involved in the budget process. CFO is one thing. Thank you. But just making sure that your area is not, well, Sean's over there, the budget's over here, that we're struggling at times, I'm sure, to make the merger, but we're sure in better shape than we were 2 years ago.
No, that's good. That's good to Joe and Rick. It's really pulling me to these meetings and being active. So thank you. I know you have a very busy day. If you have any other questions, I'm more than happy to answer that.
Any more questions? Just, thank you, and I appreciate some of this square peg round hole. Yep, if you can't run it hard enough, then
We'll get there.
just arbitrary lines that you know, you have to make the call, put it down on paper, and pretty sure we'll get better. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Jim.
Appreciate it.
Sure.
How long will it break, Commissioner?
5 minutes. We're supposed to get back here, you're supposed to 10 o'clock.
Good morning, Mayor.
I guess we'll go there. Sure, sounds good. Okay.
Start us off, Sam.
Sure. I had a fairly quiet week, while you two were gone. But I want to mention the Mercury Town Hall was really lovely. It was better attended than Whiting's was. I think the further advance notice helped a lot. And the fact that it was held at Crescent Valley High School was also actually very nice because there was a large component of the student population involved between their National Honor Society kids and their debate club kids that were all there. And they had an opportunity to ask some questions. So that it's nice to come. I really appreciate that when high school kids are involved. And Congresswoman Hoyle was there as well, and she answered questions alongside Senator Murphy. She did a fantastic job. So I have gotten a response from people in the community, and they said they really appreciated the opportunity to hear from her as well. So the next piece of I did speak to a constituent this last week about an issue that has been really below my radar. When I first took office, the district attorney's office was still responsible for childcare, and not childcare. I'm forgetting the word. For the payments that are due from a spouse. Child support, thank you, after a divorce. And the district attorney's office has the option anywhere around the state of returning that function to the state of Oregon. And our DA, John Harrelson, chose to return that function to the state. So it's now performed by the DHS office in Lynn County. And what I realized was that it's not necessarily working well for everyone. There are some real holes in that system and in terms of the linkages between Benton and Lynn and the ability for us to enforce child support. And so I will be asking some questions, both of our district attorney and then probably talking to the folks over at the Lynn County, at the office in Lynn County. It's not a Lynn County office that provides that function, and maybe get someone to come and give us a report, because no idea how many people are failing to provide the child support that is due here in the county. The other is that I met with the fellow after meeting with Charlie Fountain. He says hello to everyone. He introduced me to a fellow by the name of Steve McQueen, who is running a local program called Corvallis for Refugees. To a resettlement program that is a subsidiary to Salem for Refugees, which is its own 501c3 affiliated World Relief, which has a contract with the State Department to help resettle people. And they there's been an informal network here in Corvallis doing this work for years, but they've never had that formal linkage with the federal system. Now that we do, Steve is looking to build out his network here, and you'd like to come and present to the Board of Commissioners, because this year they're hoping to bring in 3 refugee families, but over time they'd like to bring in more. They'd like to make sure that we are aware of those new neighbors that are coming into the community and help provide support. Last,
Commissioner, just to interject on that, I do have a message from Chris on my voicemail, and I have not called him back yet. You mentioned Steve, but I think the gentleman left me a message might be Chris. But anyway, I do plan on calling him back in my.
Chris, you're right.
I think there's going to be a connection.
I was thinking-
with our Health department.
Yes,
likely.
yes.
And so I was going to make that
Yes.
connection for him.
Absolutely, that's great. It is Chris. Steve McQueen is the actor. As I said that, I thought, oh, this is not right.
I mean, Steve McQueen is welcome to come to the.
When I wrote my notes, I obviously reverted to the familiar McQueen. That's funny.
So just making sure I was calling the right person back.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I have a couple of other introductions to make for him as well. The other, we did receive a request from Commissioner Craig Pope from Polk County about wanting to speak to one of us about Benton County house trash. And I just wanted to bring that up while we were all three here, so that we decide who would be best off responding to him. I think my gut feeling is that Nancy, you might be the best person, just because you've been most closely following what's going on with the whole process at this point in time.
Sure, I'm happy to do that, and he and I have had some preliminary conversations, mostly along the lines of, yes, we need to get together, and yeah, holidays and one thing or another, so I will, I have a note from Mariah, next time I meet with her, and have her help me actually schedule that.
Okay, that sounds great.
Great.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we've all had those sideline conversations with Craig, and it'd be nice to formalize that. Okay, I think that that's probably it for me. Looks like we might be.
Nancy, do you want to?
It's like, yeah, it's a good time to break, commissioners.
Yeah, because right now they're set up sort of the identify yours for yourself.
Well, welcome. We'll go ahead and get started. We have a set schedule here. Our DC people are busy, admit it. So welcome to the Corvallis folks and to this person, Val Hoyle, and staff. And Wayland, we need you there. And appreciate you being able to visit this part of your extensive district. I think that's all I have. We will try to wrap up the indoor portion 10:45, 10:50, so we can get out to the site on 53rd. We see what's going on with housing in our area. So, Mark Shepherd, do you want to?
Thank you, Commissioner. So welcome, Congressman Hoyle. Really appreciate you spending some time here with both the city and Benton County. And I know the specific interest and focus of our time here is really on housing and homelessness. And that spectrum is broad, from emergency shelter for cold nights like last night that we experienced, all the way to brick and mortar improvements in affordable housing. And we have staff from both the city and county to brief you on some information, to answer questions that you have, to talk about the good work that both the city is doing and the county is doing separately and together. Some really good teamwork happening here. So again, thank you so much for spending time here with us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brigida Olson, the city's Housing and Neighborhood Services Manager.
Thank you for your service.
I have spent 2 decades thinking about affordable housing and been with the city for the past 2 years. I think as you drove into Corvallis, you saw Corvallis looking for a future site of affordable housing. We're going to see a record number of affordable units in our community, almost 400, which I'm so excited about. And that takes years of planning and process and be able to get the gap financing. All the developers on the map sheet been working really hard at layering all the different technical subsidies to make housing affordable for really low-income individuals and families. They've relied on low-income housing tax credits, primarily the 4%. They also have utilized resources from the state, local innovative fast track money or LIFT dollars. Here at the city, we have almost $900,000 of tools or resources on an annual basis to help with affordable housing and houselessness, and that certainly isn't enough. And when you're talking about the housing continuum, so we have about $550,000 of community development block grant for CDBG that can be used for housing and affordable housing, along with 360 of home. I've spent a long time thinking about affordable housing and knowing that we haven't seen an increase in those tools in a number of years. And at the same time, the cost of housing has only gone up, interest rates have only gone up. And to have additional tools or additional at least financial resources in both CDBG and home would be phenomenal. And in addition, I would say Section 8 housing trace vouchers are such important tools to help individuals get into housing, and our housing authority is phenomenal at getting lease up and utilizing those resources, but we haven't seen an increase either, except for emergency vouchers because of coronavirus, and those are now utilized. So having more Section 8 vouchers would be also really helpful. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Paul Bolano, our community development director.
Thank you, Brigitte. Welcome. I want to talk about an exciting thing that's going on here locally, and the county's going to pick up and continue this discussion. I'll talk about it from the city perspective. Prior to the pandemic, the homeless response system was really fragmented. We have a lot of nonprofits who are out there working really, really hard, doing what they can do, often under-resourced, doing lots of volunteers, but there was no overall framework. And so it becomes very difficult for them to work among each other. It's very difficult to be following some kind of an overall strategy. And when we got into the pandemic, we realized that wasn't adequate because we needed to do things, we needed to do big things fast. And so the way we handled it at that time was the county created an emergency operations center, city, county came together, and we worked there, every day, all the time, and put together these things. From that, we spun up all sorts of new ideas. There was, I think it's 44% new beds came up. We were dealing with transitional housing and other models that came in from supportive housing, things that were too hard to do as individual nonprofits because they are small. And then when that came down, we were able to pay for that because we were dealing with the federal money for pandemic. Then when that came down, fortunately, the state came forward with House Bill 4123, which sets up these coordinated offices, and that has now really helped to add staff capacity. We're now helping these nonprofits to realize that you do this niche, you do this niche, that can work together. They're not doing case conferencing, get best practices, a lot, much more effective use of the money that they're getting, and it's just starting and really exciting. I think one of the asks we have would be if there's anything that can be done, this $1 million from the state ends. And there's part of the plan that we have is we have to figure out what the long-term funding for that function is. There's not a lot of good choices for that locally. We have ballot measures 5 and 50 that cap us at 3%. And so we can't come into the general fund and with a 9% inflation rate, that's hard. We also have, our existing resources for support of the homeless system, and you don't want to be taking away from that and taking things from people to support this activity too. But this activity is so important for getting effective use, people getting the best practices, being coordinated, getting to where they can really address the harder issues for people that have, serious mental health, serious physical concerns. And so from the city side, this has been incredibly valuable. It's allowed us to get into the permanent supportive housing market, whereas before we could just do bricks and mortar, but we couldn't hook into all those other services. And I will pass it over to our county folks to pick up what it looks like on their end. So I'm not sure who's picking that up. Julie, is that you?
Yes, it will be today. My name is Julie Arena, I use she, her pronouns, and thank you for being here. We have a couple of handouts for you that really document what Paul Bellotta is talking about, and also talk about how this funding for local coordination really helps us do what we can at the local level. And so the communication, the coordination of local partners. Yes, this is in your handout on the right side. And then also being able to support getting all the partners together so that we have shovel-ready projects and not putting that coordination on our nonprofit provider partners. So you saw one of the projects when you were coming in. We have an opportunity for more projects going forward, and that's really where we could use the state and the federal investment. And then also, what we can't control here at the local level are Medicaid investments, HUD investments, SAMHSA funding. So if you were to look at what you can control, it would be those federal investments. And then we also included a handout that really highlights some of the projects that our community partners are doing in collaboration with this support. And that's Corvallis Housing First with Third Street Commons, and also the Navigation Center. And there's some details on this, but it also highlights the growing challenges and the investments that we need from the state and federal level. And then Commissioner Ogerow, I think I should pass it off to you to talk more about the Crisis Center.
Thank you. Suzanne Hoffman, our Health Department Director, apologizes for not being able to be here today, so I'm going to step in her stead. And neither could Damian Sands, our Behavioral Health Director. We had a COVID wave. The Crisis Center is going to be located at the downtown Corvallis with 4th and Van Buren. It is an entity that we knew once we had done our criminal justice systems assessment that we desperately needed as a resource, a place for people to go when they were in mental health crisis. That wasn't the jail, wasn't the emergency department of the hospital, and that would help to keep people from becoming involved with the criminal legal system. So this is a dream come true. I want to thank Dan and his colleagues that worked for Congressman DeFazio and Senators Markley and Wyden for their contribution to funding for the Crisis Center, as well as Speaker Raphael, who made a major investment with state ARPA dollars. The Crisis Center will be open 24/7. It will be able to help people address immediate needs, redirect them to a better place, house them overnight in a lounger as they are initially assessed for their needs, or can house 5 people up to 29 days. So if someone is in crisis and really does need a little bit more time in order to stabilize, or if they don't have a home and we need to work with other community partners to find a place for them to live, this Crisis Center will allow us to do that. So in short, we are thrilled with this new capacity. The doors will open in 2024. The groundbreaking should be later this year.
So we have secured the funding needed for this project, and it's phase 1 of the overall justice system improvement project. Phase, which includes the courthouse. Phase 2 is dependent on the 16 bond measure, and will include correctional facility, sheriff's office, and emergency operations center. And most of the facilities will be on the justice community justice.
Community Safety and Justice Campus.
Yes, that's what I was saying. We have secured the property, 29 acres just south of the Hewlett Packard campus.
And I would point out that the bond measure also includes funds to contribute towards the Navigation Center that you see described in one of your handouts. We're working very closely in partnership with the Corvallis Daytime Drop-In Center on that new facility, as well as it will boost the capacity of our children's and family behavioral health program, which is currently constrained by space. We have the funding for more staff positions, but we just don't have a place to put them.
Right. Was Ricky Garcia going to weigh in on the
Commissioner, no, he was unable to be here. Commissioner Ozero interjected on his behalf.
I was assuming that, but I didn't want to leave him out, being too hasty here. But, next up is our federal legislative agenda, and as if by magic, our CFO, Rick Prager, will walk us through.
Thank you, Commissioner. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you today. I apologize for not being in person with you today. I too have been hit with the COVID bug, so if my voice tailors out here a little bit, you'll know what's going on. So I'll do my best to speak clearly. First of all, I want to say, just from the standpoint of what Commissioner Ozero and Commissioner Malone were speaking to, the county's done an incredible amount of work as it relates to trying to identify resources, both at the county level, at the state level, to be able to do a lot of these great projects. They spoke to the Crisis Center, clearly a very successful project as it relates to leveraging dollars, both at the state and the county level. In addition, as mentioned, we have a significant bond measure coming up that will be critical for a portion of our resources for the JSIP project. So those are, again, a lot of the efforts have gone forward over the last several years in terms of leveraging both county, state resources. We are continuing to be very, very aggressive as it relates to seeking out opportunities to be able to move these important projects forward. Before I speak to the federal priorities that are outlined in your packet, I will mention we do have a very robust state legislative agenda that we are moving forward as well. That includes, and I think was mentioned, I think I heard was mentioned earlier by Julie, the Homeless Navigation Center, which is a priority for us as it relates to addressing the homeless population, the homelessness issue in Benton County. This, again, would be a center that would provide a variety of shelter and resources and needs to meet our homelessness issue in the area. So we're very excited about that. That is something I think is getting a lot of attention at the state level, clearly at the federal level too, in terms of providing services. So again, we will continue to work through that process during the state legislative agenda. We also have some other key priorities that we're putting forward in relation to our emergency operations centers. The federal government has been very, very gracious in providing resources to support that effort, but we still have a bit of a funding gap for our emergency operations center. So we are continuing to pursue that at the state level. As it relates to the federal side, what you see in your packet is, I should say, a bit of a phase one of our federal priorities. We have a larger agenda that is going to be coming forth that we're going to continue to pursue through a variety of federal competitive opportunities. But we also know the congressional delegated spending process is now taking off, and we are starting to get notifications in terms of applying for those. We have been blessed the last couple sessions to actually get CDS awards for our Emergency Operations Center, as well as dollars this last time around in relation to the Benton Area Transit Program and electrifying electric buses, I should say, in terms of moving that effort forward. So again, we're very grateful for the contributions that we have received. As we move into this next cycle, things that we're focusing on first and foremost is our rural water and sewer infrastructure projects. You will see in there that we are requesting up to $2 million. We have a variety of water and sewer infrastructure in our rural parts of Benton County. These are traditionally very lower income, and a lot of these areas and this infrastructure is very deteriorated. Was built in the 80s, I believe, and as you can imagine, is definitely past its useful life. We are putting some of our ARPA funds in relation to supporting this, but there's not enough to meet the complete needs. So we're hoping to be able to put forward a $2 million request specific to improving the rural water and infrastructure areas around the county. Just more specifically, Alpine, Alsea are the two areas that we're primarily focused on. Our second area of focus is, as I think you may know, we have our health centers as part of Benton County. The federally qualified health centers are part of the county infrastructure. We have various sites around to serve the population. One area that's quite in need is the Monroe area. We need a new modular area. We have been awarded federal dollars for capital through HRSA, but it's not enough to be able to build the full infrastructure. So we're hopeful to put a request forward around the Monroe Health Center. And this is, again, another very small, diverse rural area that's about 17 miles south of Corvallis that really could use that support and services going forward. Our third area is around regional public safety radio infrastructure. I know the sheriff is here and he certainly could speak probably much more articulate than I as it relates to this, but we're looking for $2 million. Basically, bottom line is a lot of our county radio communications, it lacks interoperability in terms of coordination between fire and law enforcement. And this is seeking a way to really bolster that. We have had some efforts going forward, some state support last time with ARPA dollars to be able to support this. But again, would like to be able to seek out congressional delegated spending that can really help us address the inoperability that we have with our radio infrastructure. The third area that we have is the Jackson Fraser Wetland Boardwalk. This is about 144 acre natural area in northeast Corvallis. Pretty much what we're trying to do is restore the wetland in this particular area in terms of natural recreation. This is an area that we're looking at. About an $800,000 investment is needed as it relates to this particular area. And then lastly, we have specifically our fairgrounds exhibit hall, and we've done a lot of work. And this is our largest request, which is $5 million. And I know that's a little larger in terms of congressional delegated spending, but we're really trying to more modernize the efforts of our fairgrounds and expand with the exhibit hall. To be able to leverage more opportunities within the community. One of the things that we've been working on, there's been a study that was done actually several years ago that really identified a need for a event area within the community that could really leverage opportunities for more concerts, more tourism coming into the community, and it would also help us with our fairgrounds and our fair activities that we take on each and every year. So this is an investment, again, is relatively large. We do have some of our transit lodging taxes that we're currently putting into this effort, but we need dollars to be able to support the gap. So I apologize, Congresswoman, that's very quick in terms of an overview of the projects, but certainly we're looking forward to participating in the CDS process coming forward, and hopeful that you might be able to support some of our areas in this. So thank you.
And that was a really quick tour through quite a bit of projects. We do have a little bit of time. Questions or further information, or who to talk to specific project.
I think, first of all, thank you for making the time. I appreciate it. I know you have other business that you could be doing, and so I do appreciate you making space for us. And I had the opportunity to meet with some people on Saturday, including the sheriff and the mayor and some other people, to talk about priorities, specifically the 911 system and housing. And Dan, you were there as well, Commissioner rather. So I think there's exciting things happening, and we want to continue getting support as much as possible to make these things happen. I guess I have a couple of questions. One is, what is the vacancy rate here in Benton County and Corvallis specifically? What's the vacancy rate for
housing?
Generally
sits in a very low 1 to 2%.
It's been at 1.5 as of
February, 1.5, yeah, Eugene's 1.6.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we have to think about is we absolutely need housing and transitional services. I work very closely with now Governor Kotek and Representative Pam Marsh and the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association on the Project Turnkey, making sure that that funding didn't get caught up in politics so that we can invest in these programs to transition those hotels. I think it's a great program, and having supportive services or a number of models. So we have people that are houseless. We have people that are in and out of housing that need with supportive services, and housing can be successful. We also have a problem in that we don't have middle income housing. And that's something we don't talk about, because if you don't have middle income housing, then those people take up the stock of some of the more affordable housing. And even, I was telling some people, it might have been Saturday, I can't remember, it's been quite a whirlwind. I went out to John Day and they said they're having trouble recruiting doctors because they don't have high-end housing, right? So I think we have to think about how do we expand and build housing at each of these different levels, right? In a way that respects our land use rules and doesn't encourage, sprawl, that we build nodal development and walkable communities, but do it in a way that respects the culture of the communities. So I'd like to see a larger conversation, because it really is, it's like a chessboard. You can't just move one piece without moving some others. And then I'd also like to talk about, as we do this, what are the workforce needs? So the workforce needs are in construction. We've worked, and I know Labor Commissioner Christina Stevenson is working very hard on expanding the pipeline for construction workers, because we need more construction workers. Those are good paying jobs with benefits, but we need to let people know, specifically people that don't look like the current people that are working in construction, right, tend to be white and male, that there's opportunity for them as well. That as someone comes out of high school, that having a trade where you're making six figures with no college debt is really a great opportunity, and not have these certification and apprenticeship programs seen as a second tier option. So whether it's behavioral health, addictions and mental health services, we're in Oregon, we're at the social work, we're at the forefront of having paid supervised training for these programs. I'd love to see that started here, because then you can recruit people who can't afford to work for free. I know many of you heard this on Saturday, but this is where my passion is. You didn't, so it's for you, Pat, Commissioner. So I think we need to look at workforce, we need to look at all types of housing, and we'll work with the administration and whoever I can in the House to make sure that we know what grants are available, what programs are available, what things are happening, so that we can bring that investment back here. We had the bipartisan infrastructure act that went through, and so now we're working with the administration to make sure that those investments come back to communities like this that are doing really good and important things. So just keeping, Dan, very lucky that you chose to stay, as well as Vanessa, our constituent services person. So it's the same team that you've worked with for a long time and that you have trust in. So just let us know what we can do, and we'll just try and highlight what opportunities are there.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you talking about workforce housing specifically, because I talk about the need of all types of housing, and that ties into that. And we're starting to see a decline in school enrollment, which means families aren't living in our community. And that affects our schools, that affects our neighborhoods, that affects our local businesses. So we really need all types of housing.
And it affects your tax base.
Yeah.
Right, like that's not a small thing. And, since we fund our schools, per capita, by how many kids are there, this is important. But yeah, businesses can't fill jobs that are there because people can't afford to live in the communities that they want to work in. So this is and it's a problem everywhere. It's rural communities on the coast, it's cities, it's, you know, everywhere it's an issue. So I think we have to think about how to creatively solve these problems and do it in a holistic way. But yeah, we can't just be one piece without the others.
I know a couple years ago, it was upwards of 65% of our workforce commuted in, and I imagine that's higher now.
Right.
That's a huge percentage.
That is a huge percentage. There were, I was talking with the Coast Guard person that heads up the Coast Guard station out in Newport, and he said he was ready to promote people. So these are people working at the Coast Guard, making good money, wanting to promote someone, but nobody lived in the area, which you have to do if you're working at that Coast Guard station. They were commuting from Salem and Albany to go to work in Newport because there was no housing. So I think this is a crisis, and I'm very grateful that the governor is putting the focus that she is, and this is her passion and her background. But you know, what I want to do is work with you to see what solutions make sense for you and, you know, what's happening across the country. Also, I want to be able to go and brag about what we're doing here, because the coordination and breaking down the silos, that is not a small thing. Because then we're not stepping over each other or, you know, duplicating work when you have a limited amount of resources and energy and people. So I think that's something I'd like to talk to other people about, how well you're doing it. And I look forward to the new crisis center.
Yeah, that should be great. I did want to point out that the Monroe Health Center also serves folks down in Lane County. So very.
Yeah, no, I'm aware.
Yeah.
I used to represent Junction City in the House, so
Yes.
they work at Harrisburg, Monroe, Junction City, it's all, they work a lot together.
One of the opportunities that I heard about yesterday that I'm excited about is the notion of modular housing.
Yes.
Because that will allow for people that are non-traditional construction workers to become engaged in construction if it's in an indoor factory setting rather than outdoor in all weather environments, as well as just reducing the costs overall of new housing. Perhaps eliminate some of the red tape if, as the request before the legislature goes, they can get a 5-year building permit so that they can use that same modular recipe or plan on multiple sites rather than just have to reapply for redevelopment that uses that housing.
So there are a couple of things that we've done previously in my previous, not previous life, but my previous job as labor commissioner, and also living right on the outskirts of the Holiday Farm fire. I worked a lot because we lost a lot of houses, a lot of homes, and especially in Southern Oregon, a lot of low-income housing, right? And so we were thinking about how do we rebuild quickly and how do we do it in a way that employs Oregonians? And we came up with a program called Oregon Rebuilding Oregon, and part of it was the modular housing, building it here. St. Vincent de Paul in Eugene has just set up, they're setting up a place where they can build sort of modular housing that technically are on wheels, but as we all know, manufactured housing or mobile homes aren't actually mobile. So we're going to work at the federal level to see if what we can do to get these recognized by HUD to make sure that financing is available for these types of homes. They can be built at low cost, they can be built here. But I'll tell you, the biggest issue and stumbling block that we had in setting this up was we didn't have anyone that made trusses. So those, you know, when you're up where the roof is, we didn't do that because we've offshored a lot of our manufacturing, a lot of our mills and manufacturing had closed. So, but for that, we could have gotten things started much more quickly. So that program at St. Vinny's, because, you know, right now we're buying, when we have a natural disaster, we're buying trailers from FEMA for what, $175,000. And then people are being pushed to move out as soon as they get in. So you have people that are traumatized, who've lost everything, who immediately after finding a home are being pushed to go somewhere else. If we could actually build it, build these places, we could help people get permanent housing. It is a much lower cost. We're not spending that money to the federal government for something that isn't as nice and that we don't own. So I think these are really good programs. And again, when you're building inside, building these kind of modular homes, it's good jobs. It's not as hard as building things outside, and people can have some choices and dignity. I know that when my father was in the Air Force, we lived in a manufactured home park that, 11 by 17 trailer, as it were, and it wasn't, it was what we could afford. When he ended his time in the service, we got some housing, a duplex that was, he got with his veterans benefits, right? It was veterans housing. And it was nice, and it allowed my parents to save money to be able to buy a home back when homes were a hell of a lot more affordable. But my mother said she felt like she regained her dignity. She could invite people to come over the house. She didn't feel ashamed about where we lived. She didn't fear that, the water wasn't going to be clean or there were going to be rats somewhere, right? Like, people need some dignity to be able to start, to be able to go to work. They need housing, they need dignity, and building these things here and well, I think is something that we can do. And then we can export that out of our state, but we need to take care of here first. So I know that is a long rambling, but I just wanted you to know this is a passion, and I get it. I get it very personally, and I think we can come up with a solution.
Congressperson Hoyle, one of the things that we are having trouble with is the council has taken kind of an all housing in approach, and several years ago, Councilor Weiser was one of them as well at the time when she was in council, was voting for like high density residential and things. And so we brought a lot in. A lot of the affordable housing you see today is on those sites that were chosen. Those were some difficult votes for the council members to take in light of everything. But what we're seeing more and more in projects is anything that has an Army Corps of Engineer wetland on it is now going to 2 to 3 years. Those sites most of them have been under approval. We've changed codes. They're good to go. They're not trying to do anything that's controversial with these wetlands, but it's just the processing period. We have a number of sites on all parts of, hundreds and hundreds of units right now are being held up by Corps approval processes.
That's something we can absolutely put pressure on. I'm very excited. I got put on the Transportation Infrastructure and Natural Resources Committee, and I'm on the water subcommittees on both of those committees. So this is something that we can definitely take up.
Well, I would like to point out, while you and Senator Berkeley were having the Saturday town hall, Commissioner Weiss and I were in Washington, DC at the NATO legislative conference. We did this Tuesday, we did get to got to your office and saw Bobby.
Oh, yeah, Bobby.
And we got to go over some of these priorities and
Great.
introduce ourselves, but the timing was not of our choosing.
No, I understand that. It seemed like everyone from here was in DC the day after I came back, and I don't know how that got planned, but hopefully we'll be able to catch up next time. And Bobby Puckett was Peter DeFazio's legislative director, so he has an enormous amount of background and knowledge about this district and also transportation and infrastructure, because that Peter was the chair of that committee. So again, I feel very lucky that I inherited people with such knowledge, but I'm glad you got to meet with him because he's just really sharp.
And saw your name brass plaque already.
I know, how weird. I'm just looking at this, Congressperson Val Hoyle, U.S. House of Representatives. I'm still like shocked. Wow. That's something.
But I think this discussion shows that the local government knows what to do and have great people to implement programs. But a lot of times what we're lacking is the capital funding to get started, whether it's Operation Turnkey or the Crisis Center. So I think really appreciate your joining us this morning, and I think it shows we have a good partnership, county and city and local nonprofits, The whole organization, I think, has been recognized by our state governments as, oh, yes, you deserve funding, you have a plan, you need some resources to take it further. And it's just exciting that state and local, state and national governments are recognizing, oh, yeah, I guess there is a homeless problem, and maybe we should step up and get some funding for projects. So I look forward to continuing this conversation. I'm thrilled that you get to fly back and forth. Nancy and I got in home a little after midnight last night, or 3 o'clock each morning.
Yep.
Time.
I know that flight that's into Eugene at 9:35, right?
This was Portland,
Oh, you did Portland.
and then we drive.
Yeah.
But next up, does somebody want to, from Corvallis, want to lead in to our next stop?
Yeah, I think best would be Paul Bellotta to talk about where we're headed, what we're gonna see.
Yeah, sure. We have one of our affordable housing projects just in the backyard here, so we thought if we take an opportunity to go out and take a look at it. You just need to come out and go back to 53rd and then go south. And it's just a little bit when you get down to Country Club, and then we'll pull into this project. It actually shows 2 of our projects that are new. One is going to be in that kind of more for the family type housing that's already been constructed, but then the affordable housing across the street is not coming up out of the ground. And to some extent, that's the project that, again, Nancy has a lot to go for there. She was a critical vote, I believe, on that project to get it approved. So, yeah, just head on out there, park on the street in there, and we can just get out real quick and take a look what's going on. They're in an active construction site, so we're not going to do the hard hats or anything like that, but you can get a really good site. I figured you'd be short for time and get you in and out.
And because we're environmental conscious and might be more efficient, I would suggest doing a little carpooling. Might be a little bit limited at the site. Does anybody have a red car? They should go first. So we can follow the red car.
We got a red car.
We got a red car, so that might be a little.
We do have a city of Corvallis car.
That's great.
This was, Commissioner Ojo.
I have one last
Okay.
piece that Councilor Schaefer kindly reminded me of. I got a phone call or an email last week from, I think we all did, from a counselor, city councilor down in Roseburg. And she was writing to me asking if I would be interested in supporting a piece of legislation that exempts cities and counties from liability if they set up organized camping for unhoused population. It's a big deal down in Roseburg, and I'm very interested in dealing with that insurance issue. So I have that draft legislation. I spoke to her on the phone, and Sarah Hall, Commissioner Hall from Lincoln County, is the only person on the call when we did the informational call. And it's not something we've taken up at AOC yet, but it's a very simple piece of language that Senator Anderson, who represents rural Benton County, would like to introduce as part of the omnibus housing bill that is evolving in the legislature. It's not yet part of that. That omnibus bill is now called House Bill 2001. But Councilor Schaefer wanted to know whether the Board of Commissioners would be supportive of that legislation. And I told her I hadn't had a chance to share it with you yet. So I will be sending it around, and perhaps we can discuss it and then correspond with Senator Anderson. And ideally with Greg Rayfield and Senator Gelsler Brewer shortly thereafter, let them know our support. Rep. Gomberg is also on that housing committee, so it's another person we can do.
I didn't think I remember the email.
I think I sent it around to share it with you all.
It's got lost in the blur of last week.
Yeah, he said that the councilors have not been very engaged until they met as legislative committee, and their legislative committee is quite interested now in that piece of legislation.
So you'll follow up.
Yeah, I'll keep on that.
Wonderful. Anything else?
No. Think about it.
Well-
Think about which kind of word.
It's not like chess or checkers, only took your hand off. Nancy, do you want to go next? Do you want me to?
Go,
Okay.
Commissioner, before we get started, just a logistical issue. We are having lunch delivered and it should be here in the next 5 minutes or so.
Okay.
Are you going to want to have a working lunch or you want to take a break?
We have people here.
Eat after this, the agenda.
We can have it bring it in and set it over there if you'd like.
We were talking about a working lunch, but then we'd be eating in front of you all that. That's the
Which is okay. Don't mind at all.
So if you want, we can just set it over there.
Why don't we do that? And maybe come back to the commissioners' updates and with these people that are here now.
Sounds good.
Oh, there.
Are we on 3.6
Yeah,
now?
all right, there it is. Too much excitement. 3.6, emergency sheltering update, Suzanne Hoffman. There she is.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to introduce this and I may chime in along the way, but really April and Sarah will be providing the bulk of this update. I did want to let you know that we will also be providing an update next Tuesday, February 21st to the Corvallis City Council. As you know, we are still awaiting a decision by the City Council on whether or not we will be the recipient of any of the funds that we applied for to contribute to this ongoing effort. And we really just wanted to be able to give you this update first before it goes before any other governing bodies. I do believe that Sarah and April had an opportunity to go over this information in an after action debrief with service providers this week, which they can tell you more about. So it is informed, and going forward will be informed by their thoughts and concerns and suggestions for improvement. One of the things that I think I'll be emphasizing with Corvallis City Council next week is to remind them of the journey that we've been on to get to this point. A reminder of perhaps how some of this work was handled pre-COVID, when it was a very different situation in our community and many others around shelter and homelessness, and how the old constructs are not adequate for today's situation. That what we have implemented here with our current contract is not designed to be the only solution. It fills one part of a critical gap, and there are more gaps to fill. And that it is all of our responsibility to work collaboratively and cooperatively on this and all issues related to homelessness and housing, as you all discussed this morning with Congresswoman Foyle. So we'll let you know how that goes. But the financial implications of this going forward will continue to need to be addressed because we are fast approaching our not to exceed limit on our current contract. And so we'll be seeking other funding sources in order to be able to continue to provide this service. But I will leave it there because I know that Sarah and April have some really good information to present to you. I think overall, we learned a lot from this experience. And on the whole, so far, it has been very successful. So thank you. And thank you, Sarah and April.
So thank you, Suzanne. So Sarah and I are going to share this presentation. Sarah will start with an overview. I'll provide some of the data that was collected from the activation, and then Sarah will pick it up with some lessons learned and exit interview information and other pieces.
Thank you. Good to see you all this morning. Maybe it's not morning anymore.
Still morning.
It is still good. I'm just under the radar. So this, as Suzanne mentioned, this contract is with Faith, Hope, and Charity to provide inclement weather, emergency hotel-based sheltering. She mentioned that this is filling one gap. It's not meant to add additional permanent beds. It is really meant to keep people alive when we have hazardous weather conditions. So the most recent activation was a cold weather activation, but the contract with Faith, Hope, and Charity is also for extreme heat and air quality. So it really is trying to keep people safe in those extreme weathering systems or situations. It's not meant to replace any type of current sheltering system. We really want to make sure that folks who are accessing the current shelter continue to access the current shelters. This is for folks, for whatever reason, cannot access those shelters at this time. Just a quick process overview for how Faith, Hope, and Charity has been implementing this program. They've been hosting intake at First Christian Church from 4 to 8 p.m. When the weather triggers the activation. This is a very familiar place for folks. It's accessible by bike or foot, and it's familiar and it feels safe. That's where Stone Soup operates at their hot meals each week. It's also where we have our harm reduction team members sitting up for site-based harm reduction services twice per week. They're really treating this as first come, first serve, but they're also being thoughtful about prioritizing individuals that are most at risk. They've been coordinating with Unity Shelter to make sure they have a list of who is currently accessing both the women's and the men's shelter to make sure that we aren't seeing folks cross over into the hotel program. The guests are walked through verbally with an agreement of the program. They sign that agreement, rules, hotel policies, etc. Faith, Hope, and Charity has a 16-person van. So they can transport individuals to the hotels that are within Corvallis who have kind of welcomed this program. They also have handled storage of guest personal items case by case. So each individual is handed a tote bin that they can put their personal items in the room. But if there are bigger items, they'll kind of work with them to figure out their storage needs. For those of you who might not know, this is a big issue, is storage of personal items, and folks don't want to leave them. And so anytime we can help address where personal items will go and how they will be transported or stored, the more we open up the door for an indoor sheltering situation for individuals. The guest number per room, they've been in alignment with the hotel policy based on how many beds and type of beds are in each room. And they have peers on site overnight, and they also pivoted from night security being on site to having a plain clothed, unarmed security on site provided in kind from NICE Security, because there were concerns about that that we've heard. But that was a part of what helped open the door for this program at several of the hotels. That was one of the selling points, is they would have that support. And then checkout tends to be at 10 a.m. But again, if they've allowed for accommodations for individuals if they're not feeling well, or if it's still cold outside, they've allowed for them to check out a little bit later. But the expectation is that folks check out for the day. And then if they're interested in coming back that evening, if it's cold, they can check back in. They won't leave their things in the room or have a room that they can stay in all day. Okay, so for the first activation, if you remember that the ink was barely dry on this contract when the first activation occurred. We really needed to move quickly to ensure that Faith Hope and Charity could be prepared for the cold weather that was approaching quickly. So they were open January 28th through February 1st. 3 hotels were utilized. The initial expectation was for 15 hotel rooms, and because of this long cold snap, they were able to increase the number of hotel rooms to up to 26 rooms per night. Per the hotel policies and individual circumstances, there were 1 to 4 people per room. In all, there were 65 clients, guests who were served. You can see the age range there from babies to 72 years old. The guests were predominantly male, and almost 60% self-identified mental health and substance use disorder concerns. Thanks, Sarah. The hotel stays, you can see here, not only the number of clients per day, which as the cold weather persisted, started at 33 and went up 75% to 58 in the final night of activation. The table to the left shows the number of nights stayed by the number of guests. So 24 guests stayed for all 5 nights, and you can see the breakdown from there. So we de-identified the names of the hotels to maintain privacy. We've got Hotel 1, Hotel 2, and Hotel 3. This shows that Blue Hotel, Hotel 1 stayed steady with 8 hotel rooms per night. The Yellow Hotel was able to be increased after the second night of activation from 6 up to 10 rooms. And then Brown Hotel, Hotel 3, was also able to increase capacity up to 8 rooms on that final night of activation. So the self-reported, a lot of data for our contract is collected by Faith Hope and Charity. All of this data it was provided by them and is required after each activation. Client demographics included asking the county of residence and the city of residence. I do want to clarify that the city of residence listed as Albany was confirmed as a group from North Albany who had been doing some camping. So here we see the age. We talked a little bit about a range, but now you can see the age buckets listed and the overall self-identified gender of clients. We see, predominantly 25 to 54 age range, but 5 minor aged folks and 1 individual 65 and older. Information gathered from Faith Hope and Charity also included race and ethnicity information. You can see the breakdown here.
Clients were also asked about self-reported mental health diagnoses and concerns, as well as substance use disorder diagnoses and concerns. Over 70% of clients reported mental health concerns, and 64% reported substance use disorder diagnoses and concerns, and almost 60% reported both. On intake, just over 3% of all clients reported being connected to mental health or substance use, case management or treatment, 3%. And we'll see that changed as they were connected with services.
I just want to give a big shout out to our intern Thomas Packbush, who put this data together for us. He really did a beautiful job. Faith, Hope, and Charity also was really thoughtful about conducting an exit interview for all of the guests that stayed during that first activation. So they were able to secure 42 exit interviews out of the 65. Some of those were kiddos, and we didn't obviously conduct exit interviews with them. And some of them, they just didn't get a chance. But these are the questions that they asked. We're going to highlight just the last three. What did you like best about your stay? What would you change about your stay? And what has prevented you from accessing shelter in the past? And so without having the beautifully coded and quantified Excel spreadsheets in front of us, the majority of folks said nothing. They would not change anything about their stay. Folks also said a longer stay. So either would like to see this program happening every winter, all winter, or more nights during the winter, or to stay during the day, right? So that they could so they didn't have to pick up and leave. The next biggest item about the stay was just in general roommate issues. For the most part, folks were able to kind of group themselves that in a way that felt okay and felt safe. And some folks they just didn't appreciate their roommates or the fact that they needed to have a roommate. So a couple of folks also mentioned kind of the check-in, check-out process, that could be tightened up. And then an additional question, what has prevented you from accessing shelter in the past? And the majority of folks, had shared that, they're a couple or they're a family, and there aren't couple or family shelters that have room for them. Either they had PTSD, anxiety, or just didn't want to be in an indoor space with a lot of people in some type of a congregate setting. That was another reason. There were quite a few folks that just said, I haven't needed it. It hasn't been cold enough for me to need to be indoors in a shelter setting. And some folks just said, I'm banned from the current sheltering system because of behavior or issues that may have happened in the past. Or they mentioned a disability or a medical issue where they just didn't feel comfortable in a shelter setting because of that. Some of the beautiful quotes that were pulled out of the what did you like best about the sheltering program. Folks said a lot about a hot shower, although we didn't include that here. It was warm, it's a comfortable place, relaxing and safe. Staff were friendly, they loved the people that were running it. One individual said that they loved that they had a place where they could use the internet to job search, recollect themselves, and recognize who they are in a mirror. So I think that there were there was a lot of really good feedback provided through that exit survey. There were some challenges. Some of those had to do with just more just personality behavior issues. There was a big jump, if you remember that hotel slide, there was a big jump in clients on the third night. So I think it went from like 36 to 56, so 30-ish to 60-ish. And the Faith Hope and Charity staff and volunteers were not prepared for that big jump in clients. So that made intake a little bit slower. Folks were getting impatient, but overall they were able to get everybody processed who needed to be indoors and where they and to their rooms and where they needed to go. During that activation, there were 2 rooms smoked in, so they had the $250 cleaning fee per room. A couple had a verbal argument and were asked by hotel staff to leave. And then there, was a roommate issue that needed to be addressed. But
Sarah, question
yeah.
for you regarding the smoking fee piece. Is that, so those folks that were utilizing those rooms, are there any consequences? I would assume that that was one of the things they signed, is they wouldn't smoke in the room, or are they prohibited from accessing these services in the future or not?
They are not. They are really trying to keep this as low barrier as possible, and want to make sure that folks can come back inside. And so I don't have the details of what kind of conversation they might have had with the individual, or individuals that were in the room that were smoked in. Although we want to honor hotel policy, it's a minor issue in comparison to having someone being outdoors in the cold and at risk of. Yeah.
Sarah, could I jump in on that as well? I just want to emphasize that, focus on national best practices, including by the National Alliance to End Homelessness, that the very definition of a low barrier shelter is that you would not have a consequence for this kind of minor offense. And believe me, much more major circumstances could have occurred, and we'd be working hard not to have adverse consequences for those kind of events. These are folks who have fairly high needs, and no resources. So, viewing this not as a perk or a luxury, but more as a life-saving measure. And again, part of the problem with many folks in this population is that they have been banned from other shelters for behaviors such as this or other kinds of behaviors. And again, in keeping with best practices, those kind of bans, particularly if they are long-term or lifetime bans, or some kind of a financial assessment of debt, is absolutely contrary to the definition of a low barrier shelter. So even though this is not ideal, it's actually among the bumps in the road we might have experienced, very minor.
Yeah, understood. And the reason I asked that question is because I think it's something to monitor. Because when you look at the fees that were just paid, those fees probably would have housed, maybe 4 other people just for that one consequence. So I think it is something to be aware of and to monitor and see if it is a real issue or not. I don't know if it's a real issue or not, but when I see $500, it's like, darn, that could have been $500 that's spent on including more people in the program.
Sure. I'll just add that, we have to expect some costs like this, whether it's damage to a hotel room or smoking fees, and people who rent hotel rooms. I'm certain people who pay for hotel rooms often, it's not uncommon for people to smoke in hotel rooms or damage things in hotel rooms. So we should assume that having a hotel sheltering program would incur some of these expenses. I agree, we should keep an eye on it.
Thank you.
Maybe this is an opportunity to emphasize as well that Faith, Hope, and Charity has a set of expectations that they do explain to every guest. and they're quite serious about them. They also make it clear that they are not guests of the hotel per se, that they are guests of Faith, Hope, and Charity, and that Faith, Hope, and Charity takes its responsibility to maintaining this this resource for everyone who needs it very seriously. So just want to emphasize that they make that a priority in the intake process.
Thank you, Suzanne. We also wanted to share some of the successes. So there was a family of 4 living in their vehicle, and we're staying at the hotel program while awaiting acceptance into Unity Shelters transitional housing program. During the stay, the father applied for a job and was hired, which is great news. There were 2 pregnant couples with substance use disorder, and they agreed to receive treatment services. Unity Shelter is working on getting them into housing right now. A female client agreed to be transported to a substance use disorder treatment facility in Eugene, and that occurred. A male client was accepted into transitional housing through COI. And one of our campsites in our community that's considered the most intense in the area, the word on the street is that was mostly empty for 2 days. And so those are typically folks that we think of as not wanting to leave their things because they have a pretty established camp, but it was cold enough, the program was safe, it felt like something that was accessible to them. And so we saw them leave their things. Some of the areas for improvement have to do with that jump in clients or guests from on that 3rd night. So Faith, Hope, and Charity needs more skilled and trained staff and volunteers to support a more streamlined intake process. So maybe 3 or 4 people instead of 1 to do intake, especially since they are asking a set of questions of each individual. And then there is a need to identify immediately deployable volunteers depending on surging and changing capacity. They are also hoping to add a medical fragility question to that intake because it's more than just, we have multiple co-occurring disorders for folks that are being served here. And so they want to make sure to add that question. And then there really is a need to identify an alternative plan and location for sheltering due to sustainability concerns, both of funding and of hotel availability. I think they have got really lucky that first activation where they could secure the hotel rooms that they need, but I don't think we can assume that that can work every time we see cold weather or extreme heat or air quality issues. And so there's still this need to kind of work through that as a team to identify an alternative.
You know, cold snaps don't occur immediately between conventions and conferences.
Or football games.
Yeah, except this time,
Good
right?
point.
Didn't John say there were 2 conventions happening and that's why?
Yeah,
There's limited capacity.
yes, there's a current, they're activated currently.
Right.
And yes, there is a concern and limits on the number of hotel rooms available.
Well, and I can see on the flip side, the hot weather side, summertime, maybe more vacation kinds of usage. People are out traveling more, so I can see that being a concern. And you've answered part of it, but I mean, it's 2 sides of the coin, and it's the people that we're trying to get housed, but it's also, and this is early days, but just response from the hotels, how's it working for them? Because if it's not working for them, then the program doesn't function, at least at a level that we need. And so, in the future, feedback from participating hotels, and if it's working out for them. I can see other hotels saying, oh, okay, we didn't want to try it at first. We wanted to see how it played out, and if it's successful for everybody, then I think we have a better chance of having a robust program going forward.
Agree. I do believe that Faith Hope Charity has a plan to conduct interviews with hotel management to determine how it went for them, what they could do differently. I do know, just anecdotally, I've heard that the hotel management has appreciated having a plainclothes security guard check in with them, versus kind of knocking on doors and checking on individuals in the hotel room, but checking in with management to let them know that they're available if you need anything. We have heard that they've appreciated that, but I do agree that that will be beneficial information for all of us to have.
We also heard from our fire marshal that they appreciated that it was a very quiet 5 nights. No, in terms of the hotel sheltering program, there were not calls to fire.
How do you get the message out on that particular day? What's the verification process? Folks know that our doors are now open.
For potential guests.
For potential guests.
Yes, well, outreach, so harm reduction, SORT team, daytime drop-in center, and the other shelter providers, and then word of mouth. One of the questions was, how did you hear about this? And it was, my harm reduction outreach worker, my case manager, word of mouth, my friends. So word just travels through that network of community members. So there is kind of an alert to the housing providers so that they're aware that it's occurring, and then it just goes from there.
Can I just say that I think that's good, and I think that's my preferred. I think we should stick with that versus like doing a blast, because I wouldn't want all of a sudden people from Eugene, other areas swarming, and taking up shelter capacity that's intended for our community members.
Absolutely, it's only for Benton County residents, and I just want to echo what's being said is that the coordination with the home service providers is absolutely key for success. This is one little piece of really multifaceted need, and we still have need. We can't meet the demand during this cold weather. So this is something that has been implemented to fill a gap, and we're seeing how big the gap is. So continued coordination is absolutely going to be crucial to continue to ensure that the pipeline, the whole continuum can start to come and continue to work together where it works together well and be connected where it doesn't.
But did we turn any guests away? We didn't have any more room.
Well, that's a great question for this activation. Only 15 hotel rooms were available on each night so far. The activation started on Monday night. The terms of our contract are strictly for hotel sheltering, and Faith, Hope, and Charity worked with First Christian Church to operate an overflow. This is overflow sheltering that we're doing, so overflow to the overflow. On Monday night, they served 7 guests, and Tuesday night it was 13. I don't have the number for last night yet, but they on their own are meeting the overflow.
To remind you, our original RFP envisioned a congregate setting only. And it was, of course, no one responded to that RFP. So as we and many of our community partners were looking for anyone that might step up and be willing to negotiate with us directly following that failed RFP process, it was obviously Faith, Hope, and Charity who stepped up and said, we have a proposal, but it's all around hotel sheltering because we think that's a better way for a number of reasons. We think it's a model that we actually can realistically implement as we build capacity. And so we said, okay, let's give that a try. But here we are now understanding that we really need both. We need this hotel program, I think, should continue. We've dispelled some myths here, myths that those people won't come in. Yes, they will. Those people don't want services. Yes, they do. It also tells us that there's still a need for overflow of the overflow in perhaps a congregate setting. We anticipated that to be probably the case because not everyone will be successful in a hotel situation. We know that. Some people may prefer not to be in a hotel situation. And we anticipated we may not, or Faith, Hope, and Charity may not have enough hotel rooms at any particular point in time to accommodate the volume. I think what we did not see coming was the incredible amount of volume that came in. Now, those are higher numbers than we had anticipated. And so certainly that there's evidence there that we need more of a continuum of emergency overflow options, and we'll continue to plan and pursue resources for those things. I also want to emphasize that because our contract is so limited to exactly the scope it is, when Faith, Hope, and Charity contacted us and said, we need to be able to utilize the congregate setting at the church as well, we had to let them know that we could not fund that we are only able to reimburse for the services and supplies that the contract specifically references. So whether we look at an amendment to our contract going forward, perhaps that's an option. We still need resources, however, to pay for it. But because of that contract limitation and our resource limitation, Faith, Hope, and Charity actually said, well, Fred Edwards said, we're going to do this anyway because it's the right thing to do. And they would just cover the costs themselves. So I was originally going to, in this public setting, thank Fred Edwards and his organization and his team for stepping up to this work. And for working so collaboratively and so generously with us and with all of the other service providers who would come to the table in the area. And now I want to add on that another thank you for going above and beyond and taking on additional levels of shelter this week that we were not able to reimburse for in our contract.
Thank you, Suzanne.
We did host a debrief, as Suzanne mentioned, with not only Faith, Hope, and Charity, but other homeless service providers, and collected a lot of good input and feedback, but a lot of thank yous and gratitude expressed to Faith, Hope, and Charity for their work, especially as Suzanne mentioned, since or maybe it was you, the ink had just dried on that contract before they did their first activation. One of the things we heard, and this goes back to that need to continue to think about the location and the sustainability and what will work best more long-term. And we actually heard from Faith, Hope, and Charity staff that a congregate setting doesn't work for everybody. A hotel setting doesn't work for everybody. And so maybe as we start these discussions to think about what might work best, we look at some type of hybrid model where we have families, maybe women or couples in a hotel setting, and congregate is for those who may do better in a congregate setting. I know when we activated that one night in December, me and Benton County staff, we saw 30 people dropping in and out during the night. With a hotel program, you don't drop in and out during the night. You checked in and you check out. But we know there are folks who may get cold at 3 in the morning, and that's when they come in, and we want to make sure that we can keep them safe and warm. We also had 3 women at that activation. and they were very uncomfortable. So we had to kind of partition them off in a makeshift way, and let them know that we would have staff on site awake all night with eyes on. And so that to me means that, you know, we may need to consider hotel rooms for those situations. We may need comfort bed for others.
One other topic I really don't want to forget to mention. There's been some degree of concern and frankly misinformation about the security aspect of this contract. From what I understand, and I think Sarah and April can confirm, the security presence was absolutely minimal and non-intrusive. And the other thing I want to emphasize is that not only is the security presence not a negative when done well, but it is probably a significant part of the reason that the hotels are willing to participate in this process. They know Fred Edwards, they know how he instructs and guides his security staff. They knew that before this project came along. And so quite the opposite of some of the concerns some of you may be hearing about that aspect of our contract, we actually see it as a positive.
I haven't heard any further concerns since those initial concerns expressed after the first couple of days of activation.
Well, I think that's the end of our presentation. We're happy to answer any additional questions you might have. I know you're great.
Initially, you were talking about the, so it's another question, the trigger of cold weather or and for next summer, extreme heat. Weather forecasts, or how do you, what's your crystal ball
Well, we have activation criteria. Crystal ball obviously is a little trickier with as our climate continues to change. We used a lot of data to come up with these activation thresholds, including decades of weather data, both on the cold and the hot. And the air quality pieces came from standards at the national level. We know that we're having warmer summers on average, a lot more uncertainty throughout other times of the year. So we did come up with a range and an average. So far, since the contract has been implemented, we've had a pretty wild state of weather. So I think it might be good to go with the range and the higher end of the range rather than the average, if we were to look at this again, because there's so much volatility and uncertainty.
So at this point, there's three aspects of the program: cold weather, extreme weather, and air quality.
Yeah, they're specifically. So I think on one night, the other day when we had snow in the morning, the low was projected to be 31, which doesn't meet activation criteria, but there was more than an inch or more snow forecast for the area. So that's written into our activation criteria. If there's more than 4 hours of ice overnight, that's another piece that's written into the cold. So there are some caveats there to highlight where weather conditions are hazardous beyond just a number.
Maybe a good project for an intern would be, you get well, this is the temperature in Corvallis. Well, that can vary quite a bit depending on where you are in Corvallis, and I can see some low spots where it's colder than average. Not to make your job any harder, but just to make that forecast temperature more accurate, I guess.
I hear you, Commissioner. You know, if I pull up the weather on two of these phones, I'm gonna get two different numbers, right? So we decided on using a single standard, and that's the National Weather Service forecast for 97330, which, yeah, and that at least gives us one source.
Well, consistent in the.
Yeah, but I
know what they're doing.
understand, yeah. There definitely are variations from the Hislop Field Station down to downtown Corvallis and up into, you know, the hillier areas of town, a lot of variation.
And as a reminder, these thresholds are different all in different communities around the state, and it's it's often resource-based as much as anything else. For example, I believe Multnomah County activates when the temperature is going to be 25 or below for at least 4 hours overnight. That's a very different, and then they may have some other factors in there too. That's obviously a more severe standard than what we attempted to put in place here. And it's not to suggest that any temperature, probably below 40 even, or even warmer is a safe place for folks to necessarily sleep outside. But the higher you go up in temperature or the more relaxed you make your standards, then obviously you're going to be activating for more nights, and then that becomes a financial issue. So although we would like to have activation before something gets to 30 degrees or the other conditions that April described, we have to be mindful of the pot of money we currently have to fund it. So additional resources will not only keep us going with our current standards, but if we had enough additional resources, we could potentially alter those standards over time. And unfortunately, the reverse is also true. If we have a more limited pot of funds to work with, we might have to make those standards more severe and open on fewer nights.
Well, I'm really excited about the fact that by having sort of non-congregate shelter, we were able to reach some of these couples and families that otherwise just were out of reach of some of our providers and health navigators, et cetera. That's pretty remarkable.
Is it possible to pull that up again and go back to the slide about the successes? I was just fighting it myself. I mean,
We had that initially as well. I'm unable to go backwards.
Maybe the
I
battery
guess,
died.
yeah, and you know, I've got some in my notes I wrote down that, you know, the family of four, okay, yeah, living in their car.
Thank you.
You know, the father getting a job, that's amazing, that's great. 2 pregnant couples with substance use disorders agreeing to have treatment. Another female client transported right then. I mean, this is real impacts for our community and impacts the individuals' lives. I mean, this is great, this is amazing. So I'm glad that number one, we obviously kept people alive and not freezing to death in the cold. 5 children, 5 children that were going to be out in the cold, and we're not. So I'm just extremely grateful for the team that put this together and for Faith, Hope, and Charity and just all the great work that went into this.
This presentation is available to you. I apologize, it wasn't in your packet. We did get some permission to submit it late due to our late addition to your agenda, but it is available to you. It was provided to the Board of Commissioners office just yesterday.
Thank you.
Great, and I'm impressed anytime you can imagine a program and then implement it and get it in the ballpark initially, I think is impressive. And so I look forward to going over the slide. this seems like for something that didn't exist a little over a month ago, to have a operating program that it sounds like just relatively minor bumps and things that need to be addressed. It's impressive. So thank you and your team and your intern for the statistics are really helpful. How many people and where did they come from, and just kind of a context to give some meat to the program.
Thank you. I think it's so important to get good data from these efforts. It only serves to help inform where to move to these things. And yeah, just a plug for more good data on these efforts. Really proud of Faith, Hope, and Charity and the teams that have been providing a lot of support. This is a brand new thing with an organization that hasn't done this specific thing before. So the capacity building, it's been a big lift, honestly. We're putting a lot of resources into helping. I mean, they've got the one-on-one relationships down. They've got a lot of great skills. The pieces that we're helping with are, you know, the outreach pieces, the capacity building in terms of invoicing and different communication and making sure that providers are connected. But they are doing something amazing. I do think that they're well on their way to having invested this capacity building to, you know, they haven't had a moment since this contract has been signed to say, oh, let's build a volunteer infrastructure and let's develop this. So hopefully after tomorrow night, the weather will chill out for a little bit, will warm up for a little bit so that they can start to really develop some of these pieces. And I will say that, you know, I'm the contract manager for this contract. The money is going quickly. And this activation is going to really put us close to the end of our capacity here.
April, what did this cost, or do you have that figure at this point?
I do, yeah. So I have the actual cost for the first activation and the startup costs. So the startup costs and the first 5 days. This activation is looking to be 5 days as well. So it's easy to kind of make some comparisons.
Sure.
Was $29,000. This activation, it's, you know, my back of the napkin math here will put us at about $49,200 total, and we have $50,000 in the contract.
Right, our reminder, our not to exceed amount in our contract is $50,000 with the potential to amend it if we get additional resources. Thus, our visit to the Corvallis City Council next Tuesday. Hopefully some of those funds that we applied for might come our way for this effort. If not, we'll be back to you rather quickly. And of course, talking with Rick Krager and looking at other resources, because if we don't get additional resources, this week may be the last activation until we do.
Can you remind me which funding pot that the city is putting out there that we're applying for?
I don't remember exactly what it's called, Commissioner. I apologize. I can look that up and get back to you. But this is the one. It was, gosh, it's been a couple of months at least now, where they put it out specifically for the purposes of hoping that someone would ask for them. I think it's about $1 million in total, if I remember correctly. And it's looking for folks to apply for it. What they were hoping to get was interested parties in developing affordable housing, permanent supportive housing, transitional housing. And no one came forward with a proposal on that. And so they gave those of us who were interested the ability to apply for it for various kinds of shelter purposes as well, including our need for a severe weather emergency shelter overflow. There were 2 organizations that applied for the funds, Benton County and Unity Shelter. We have both spoken in front of their advisory committee. Staff have made various recommendations to City Council, and we continue the conversation next Tuesday. But I believe they have approximately $1 million to expend, and they will need to decide whether or not they grant it. It appears that the desire is to try to split the pot, but we'll see where they land and what they decide. It's very flexible funding from what I understand, which is why they're able to open up their definitions. But my sense is that that the range of council member views on the topic are varied, and so they've been continuing the conversation over the last several weeks.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate this early update. I know you could do a better job with numbers and how it's working if this was later in the year, but I think it's important to get feedback on the initial how the program's working, and so I appreciate the report.
Commissioner, before April leaves and the rest of the team, just wanted to, first of all, thank you, acknowledge you, and congratulate you for your willingness to serve as the interim health department director. I had the opportunity to personally close the loop with you, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to do that.
Thank you very much, Carol. Thanks, Commissioners. I look forward to working more closely with all
Great.
of you. In the interim.
All right. Joe, 3.8, your transition discussion is 30 minutes.
Commissioner, it will actually not take that long. I guess it'll be probably more like 15 minutes.
Okay.
And I was wondering about switching so that I could present on the housing emergency situation before these folks left, because it's.
Yeah, so again, that's the order that it's actually
Okay.
set up in. So we have 3.7, and then we have 3.8. Also keeping in mind, we have folks joining us for the executive session.
Mhm.
And we also have a time constraint of Commissioner Wang, it's still meeting between 1:30
and 1:45.
Okay. My update will be very brief. I've been working with Julie and Rebecca and Suzanne on the governor's housing emergency and how do we respond? Do we indeed declare a state of emergency here in Benton County and ask to be included in the emergency order along with the counties that were included on the basis of their count data, because they're individual continuums of care that have met the threshold. And this issue has become pretty political in Salem. And what the governor's office and the legislators are working to do is to keep the emergency order more or less intact, but they intend to include the remainder of the state, balance of state, however you wanted to put it, rural or in continuum care, in some of the funding measures for sure. That we don't know what that looks like yet. What's going on right now is that the legislators are working on a 60-day fast track piece of legislation that will make several policy changes and then go to Ways and Means to get funded. And that is not, I mean, the policies that they're putting into place will be relevant everywhere. They're not restricted to those emergency areas. And they include things like change in the processes for eviction, expansion of type of program that's available for youth homelessness. And there's a piece on modular housing. And so that bill, House Bill 2001-1, is moving forward. I testified yesterday on it, just to let the committee know that those of us that are in the balance of state and that are part of the pilot program in particular are very interested in continuing to engage and want to be included, but that we'd like to see further investment in the pilot program for that coordinated regional homelessness response, so that there's infrastructure capacity in order to absorb and use this kind of emergency dollars effectively. So we'll see what they heard as they move forward. So that's it. I still am left at this point not knowing whether it's worth declaring a housing emergency at the local level, just to cover our bases, or whether we should just continue to wait and watch. But we do know from emergency management and from conversations I've had that they will be reviewing many of those additional applications being in the executive order as of March 10th. So there's a time window that we will need to comply with if we do want to join into that strand. It's still clear as mud.
Okay, are there specific guidelines or criteria?
Yes.
On how to declare?
Yes.
Why we would declare?
Oh, it's a threshold. Julie can address that best.
We meet the threshold. It's a certain number percentage going up with homelessness, and a certain number of people. We meet the threshold. What is clear as mud and what has not been articulated well is, are there any requirements imposed at the local level if we declare a state of emergency? And that is where the hesitation is, because we haven't had that answer really clearly.
But there is no requirement. We initially thought there might be a requirement to set up an emergency operations center if you declare an emergency, and that is not the case. The plan is to have a statewide emergency management activation center so it would impose an extra burden on the counties. But we're also not 100% clear what benefits come with the declaration. And if it does give us access to early funding, it might fund things like the inclement weather sheltering, and because that's the population that it's really designed to reach. But we don't know.
Sure. Besides the potential for, like, we're trying to figure out, I guess, the requirements, if it triggers any additional requirements on us at the local level. Do we know when we'll know those?
No.
No, the answer kind of changes.
Okay. Is there any other drawbacks to doing this besides that unknown?
This one, I'm feeling like there aren't any other big drawbacks, and that, if we really want to cover our bases, we might want to consider declaring a homelessness emergency.
I mean, if it can potentially, help us. I mean, our job as commissioners is to advocate for our community, and especially our most vulnerable community members. So I would say we should advocate. But obviously, you don't want there to be unintended consequences.
So Zane, you've been on all those emails. Are we forgetting anything?
Not that I can think of. The only, I guess, other piece of information I've heard, although I don't know how it will come into play here, is, obviously this is all going to work its way through the legislative process. And as you know, the legislators may make very different choices than what has initially been proposed in the governor's recommended budget. And there seems to be some indication that there's a pretty high level of awareness and sensitivity about the communities who are left out of the emergency order. Might they try to do something to address that? Possibly. But even at that, I'm struggling to think of what a downside would be to sort of making sure that we've sort of, checked every box we can check in terms of aligning ourselves well, no matter what happens. And so in the absence of any information that would indicate what the downside would be, I would also lean toward declaring the emergency, just to be sure that, our needs are considered in the process.
Can we undeclare an emergency?
Oh, yeah.
Like quickly, if we declare the emergency and then we're like, oh shoot, there is these unintended consequences, can we just undeclared?
It's up to us as commissioners.
Yeah, okay.
But if I were to undeclare an emergency and it was based on specific data, I would want to at least get some of those thresholds down below where they trigger the emergency, otherwise we don't look very.
Okay, that's good. Yep, that's good consideration.
Sam.
Mhm.
Would it make sense to try to get some guidance from our legislators on best way to proceed?
I can reach out again. I've spoken to Representative Rayfield about it. He assured us that the rest of the state would get resources and would be covered. Initially, this House Bill 2001-1 included language that the whole state would be covered by the state of emergency. And then they decided sometime before the hearing on Tuesday that no, that was not the case. They were withdrawing that. And there was some sort of negotiation going on between the legislative leadership and the governor's office about it. So I can reach back out to Speaker Rayfield's office and ask that question specifically. And that might help inform us.
It looks like we have about 3 weeks before the
Yeah.
March 10th deadline, so maybe get it teed up and
Yep.
wait. Basically, as long as we can before the 10th to follow through.
We'll put a placeholder on our first meeting in March, which is what I've been thinking for this item, so that we could consider it and have it ready to go. I had kind of the funny experience of being in the queue waiting to testify and getting a phone call from Representative staff and telling me, please change your testimony. So, yeah, they're watching this and they're in the thick of it, so yeah, I'll give them a call and see what I find.
March 10th is a Friday, so we would have board meeting on the 7th.
Mhm.
So that would be my recommendation, because I don't think it does us any good to declare an emergency and then undeclare it.
From the staff perspective, do you want a letter prepared, language prepared, or will we wait to hear from the Commissioner?
Well, you've got the data, so it's not a huge lift to put together a declaration. But you would probably have to make sure that Vance is available in order to look at it, so.
Suzanne, yeah, can I go ahead and take that on?
Oh, yep, please. And Vance has certainly through the last few years obviously encountered declarations of emergency for other purposes before. So let's work closely with him on how this moves forward.
We do have templates these days.
Where, yeah.
Okay, well, I'll let you know what I learned.
Okay, anything else? If not, I think it's getting perilously close to lunchtime. And my arithmetic says, you said about 20 minutes, Joe?
Commissioner, probably closer to 15, depending on questions the board might have.
Okay.
So I'm fine with the working lunch.
Okay, 5-minute break to get lunches and then assemble back here to the county administrator update. And I'm suggesting an executive session after that if this advance is available, and then finish up with commissioner updates as time permitting. Sound like a plan?
Sounds good, sounds great. Thank you, Sheriff, for the note.
Okay, Commissioner Malone, would you like me to go and get started?
Please get us started on county administrator transition discussion with you and Suzanne.
You bet, Commissioners, thank you. As I've shared with you previously, as I begin to wrap up my tenure with Benton County, I've been really trying to focus primarily on the budget. There's a host of things going on, but there's blocks of time on my calendar over the last 2 weeks, which have just been dedicated to working with Rick and Suzanne on making budget decisions, primarily in the area of policy packages. So we will be hoping to wrap up, and Rick is probably smiling here in the background, but we hope to wrap up the majority of our decision making by the end of next week, if at all possible. And so that is our hope and our goal. But we continue to work through that process, and I want to thank Rick and Jen Anvil for helping shepherd that process for us. So I want to let you know we are making progress there, and Rick and Suzanne will have lots to talk to you about once it comes to the budget committee meetings that start in April. And I think Rick currently has 6 or 8 of those sessions scheduled with the budget committee. Suzanne and I just started yesterday dedicating time on our calendars to meet just to talk about transition items. This is a laundry list of items. I think I have 50 or 55 items right now. And so just trying to get her up to speed on all of these various things that are occurring. So we did start that process yesterday. And so we'll continue that process until the time that I leave, which is March 15th is currently my last day. Also keep in mind, I'll be out of the office the week of the 27th of February. It's been planned for a couple of months. So Suzanne will be the acting county administrator during that time. Also, as relates to things that we're looking forward here over the next week and next 2 months, you do have on your calendar to participate in the Natural Areas of Parks and Events director interviews. I've been working with HR to go through that process. We did initial screening last Thursday. We extended offers to 5 people to interview virtually. One of those 5 dropped out at the last minute, so we interviewed 4. At this point, we have identified the top 3 candidates to come in person and meet with us. So that is scheduled for next Friday. HR is coordinating the board's involvement in that. And so similar to previous hiring opportunities, the board will meet with candidates, ask questions, and then I'll meet with you subsequent to those interviews and download your feedback. I am including Suzanne in the process next Friday as well. We have 2 other panels. We have my panel of folks that will be participating to help me make the decision, and that particular panel includes Suzanne. And then we have another stakeholder panel as well. We did involve Suzanne, or let's see, I was hoping somebody else could help me with my memory. So we did include members of the a member of the Fair Foundation, of the Fair Board in our virtual interviews on Tuesday. And we also included the Executive Director for Greenbelt Land Trust on Tuesday as well as part of that initial panel. So we're making progress there. You'll see 3 candidates next Friday. And I hope to be able to make a decision as soon as possible thereafter. If not that afternoon, likely that next Monday morning. And sometimes I like to deliberate a little bit longer.
And then that's Friday the 24th, the week from
That's
tomorrow.
correct. That's correct. Also, we're planning about 2 months out right now relative to having an open house here at the Cattle Food Building for our Cattle Food Building, kind of ribbon cutting, if you will. Corey is leading the efforts to pull this together. And he'll be coming, actually briefing the board in more detail at the March goal setting. Conceptually, we're trying to combine two activities at once. And that is, we're partnering with Corvallis School District, and we will be displaying their students' art in our building. And so they are going to host an event. It'll be an open house for about 3 hours. Off the top of my head, they're also going to be hosting their art display, and they're going to have a celebration. And so we think that will help draw more people as well. That was actually Corey's idea. He's been coordinating the school district on this. So stay tuned. I just wanted you to know that we're currently holding April 20th, which is a Thursday afternoon, early evening for this open house. And Corey will be coming to brief you more next month, but I wanted you to know that when you see that show up on your calendar, that's why. And it's been a long time coming. Of course, all departments will, as we have an open house, people will be able to take self-tours of the building. All departments will be involved. Corey will be updating the department directors and our next leadership team meeting. So I'll also ask Corey to make sure that Maura is also involved in that planning, and as well as other members, departments in the building.
Great. I've been talking to Corey about this for months, and so I'm proud of what we've done here. And we need to introduce the building to the community. I like the synergies between the Corvallis Student Arts and building. I think that's a nice combination.
Agreed. So just know that that'll be, if it's not already on your calendar, it will be showing up soon. Corey will be bringing forward more details in the near future. Also, to let you know, the board had directed HR to seek proposals from recruiting firms for the next Benton County administrator. We did go through a process of where we reached out to 5 different companies. These recruiting firms have experience in the Northwest and on the West Coast. And so we did reach out to 5 out of those 5. We only received 2 responses back. Many of the recruiting firms we're finding are challenged with having more work than they can actually complete. And so 2 of those recruiting firms responded and said they're just too busy. One of them did not respond at all, but we did receive bids from 2 prospective recruiting firms. Suzanne, myself, Rick Rager, and Tracy looked at those earlier this week. They were due on Monday, and we looked at them on Wednesday. And so out of the 2 firms, Tracy and the group is coalesced around one firm. And Tracy's in the process of doing some reference checking just to make sure, but I'm sure she'll be coming forward either in person or through an email, maybe briefing for more details, but I would want to highlight that process is unfolding. So we're on schedule as we speak for where we thought we would be right now. Good. And I think, commissioners, those are my comments. I'd invite Suzanne, who will be taking over the reins starting March 16th, to share any perspectives that she would like to share before we go to the executive session.
Not much to add. Thank you, Joe. That was very thorough. I'll just echo the appreciation for Rick and Jen and the finance team for the amazing work that they're doing regarding the budget process and just how much easier that makes it for Joe and I. So thanks to them a lot.
Great, thank you, Suzanne. So commissioners, I think we're ready to go into executive session. The folks that will be including in that executive session, other than the board and myself, are Suzanne Hoffman,